dinâmica agora. Eu vou passar a palavra a Cristiane Magalhães, que é da Firjan, e é também associada do nosso capítulo, e vai trazer algumas questões e uma apresentação para um vídeo de 30 minutos de uma pessoa importante de Singapura. Ele foi presidente do capítulo de Singapura, e o vídeo é sobre como é que eles estão tratando as competências alinhadas à questão de certificação. Então, é um exemplo interessante, o vídeo tem o seu tempo. Depois fazemos um fechamento com a apresentação, o Gustavo e eu, das questões que tratamos e como é que estamos indo com o capítulo brasileiro de Open BIM. Ok? Obrigado. Cristiane, por favor.
Bom, boa tarde. Primeiramente, vou ser bem breve na fala, para a gente poder aproveitar o tempo com o vídeo, mas eu queria só trazer um contexto. Esse vídeo, essa temática, ela tem um olhar do que Singapura hoje está fazendo, o capítulo de Singapura da buildingSMART. Eles já avançaram do ponto de vista de maturidade em relação a perfis profissionais, não só no olhar de Open BIM, mas também fazendo uma interface com o VDC e com o que eles chamam de IDD, que é trabalhando com toda a parte de entrega digital integrada. E o que é bem interessante é que eles têm já dentro do site, da plataforma, que vocês vão ver pelo vídeo, uma série de documentos já estruturados de perfis profissionais. E eu trouxe isso graças à visita ao Summit de Singapura Internacional, né, que foi em Singapura. E eu conto para vocês muito rapidamente que foi uma experiência, para mim, disruptiva, porque a gente percebe que o que a gente está discutindo aqui em termos de perfis profissionais, objetivos hoje, quando a gente pega um especialista BIM, ele pode ter mestrado, doutorado ou uma especialização, e a gente não consegue definir, diferenciar esse especialista. É um trabalho que a gente está fazendo no BIM Fórum para melhorar esse tipo de percepção, essa estruturação. Mas o que a gente percebe em Singapura é que eles já estão além porque isso está dentro da parte da entrega, quase que, de fato, não só para a obra, mas a gente consegue ampliar isso para os padrões de Open BIM. Então, já vou começar o vídeo, mas só para ter essa percepção de que o que o vídeo traz é o que, particularmente, nós aqui ainda não estamos, mas talvez a gente levasse uns 10 anos, eu ouso falar uns 10 anos à frente, porque a gente está, de fato, ainda estruturando perfis básicos e eles já trazem perfis mais avançados do ponto de vista de Open BIM. Eu espero que vocês aproveitem esse vídeo, que seja realmente um diferencial, como foi para mim. O vídeo foi gravado especialmente para essa sessão e, claro, a gente não conseguiu trazer porque são 24 horas de viagem. Então, é com muito carinho aqui que eu trago essa interface e um desdobramento, de fato, das missões que a gente faz pela buildingSMART Brasil no Summit Internacional. Não vou tomar mais o tempo para a gente poder conseguir, de fato, aproveitar o que a gente tem que aproveitar, que é o vídeo. Vejam isso como algo à frente. Não o que a gente necessita hoje, mas se a gente enxerga que o à frente já está construído, talvez o trabalho que a gente tenha hoje ele seja encurtado por troca de experiências, ok? Então, bom vídeo, bom momento a todos, obrigada pela presença e pode soltar, por favor, o vídeo.
Hola, Brazil. Greetings from Singapore. First of all, I'd like to thank buildingSMART Brazil for allowing me to participate in this awesome event. Yes, I'm joining from Singapore, more than halfway around the world, crossing 13 time zones. And it's only a very small island in Southeast Asia. But we consist of multi-racial society. In fact, we have 4 official languages. And our version of English, called Singlish, is a result of our multicultural heritage. Yes, to tell you more about myself, as well as the context on which of how this presentation is about, I'm William Lau, an architect by profession. I'm also the immediate past president of buildingSMART Singapore. Also a council member in SIA, which is the Singapore Institute of Architects. I'm chairing the digital committee there. When Singapore embarked on our digitalization program, I was involved way back in even the early 90s as a local BIM expert, and all the way even until now, involved in the BIM steering committee as well as the IDD. Right. Agenda will be very simple. First of all, we have a bit of introduction. Then I'm going to talk about the pillars of digital transformation. And then I'll touch into DDM accreditation framework, and I'll end with a simple conclusion. Right, before I'll touch on a bit more on the digital transformation journey, that will bring up the context of how we relate back to the so-called DDM accreditation, right? All right, we've started off with 2D paper-based submission way back in the 90s, or even before that. And then after that comes the CAD, right, whereby we start to do our drawings on computer-aided design. And after 2000, in fact, we started the so-called the CORNET submission. It's a 2D electronic submission, and because of that, it's paperless. I guess at that time, we're the first in the world to be doing that. Next, of course, from year 2000, the BIM come into the industry. And by 2010, we actually started what is known as the voluntary BIM submission, okay, whereby models are submitted to authorities for approval. And at the same time, we're driving adoption of BIM as a key enabling tool to improve coordination and construction value chain. Then towards 2015, we started mandatory BIM submission for projects with a GFA more than 5,000 square meters. Of course, the BIM evolved eventually to VDC, or Virtual Design Construction. Some countries, they call it as IPD, Integrated Project Delivery. And this eventually developed to call IDD, Integrated Digital Delivery. This is a specific Singaporean kind of thing. Only in Singapore we have this, but due to lack of time, maybe some other opportunity I can share more about this. Of course, in 2022, by then, our CORNET is already 20 years old. So we did a technology refresh from the original version 1 to version 2, CORNET version 2. And in fact, come October this year, we're going to launch CORNET X. This is going to be a totally different so-called submission process and even the workflow, right? But in this, consultants now will have to collaborate, and they will actually have to submit a federated model. That means architecture, structure, and MEP will submit one combined model to the authorities for submission, for approval. At the same time, we have introduced the DDM, which I'll talk about it later. And we have our own version of the IFC SG. That's basically based on IFC, the 16739. But we have a local annex to help us, especially for this CORNET X submission. Now I'm going to touch on a bit on pillars of digital transformation, which I feel that is very key. In fact, as I've dealt with many countries in terms of digitalization, we find that this, in a way, represents most of the industry as far as digitalization is concerned. So I shall show you what it's all about. Right? First of all, we have the software, hardware system. Then you have the system workflow and processes, followed by skill set, competencies, and workforce. And we string them all together, all right? You need standards, right, in order for them to so-called interconnect one another. Okay. You can find this in some countries. They represent this as a technology as one part, followed by processes, and of course, people. In fact, today we'll discuss more about this in terms of competency and people who use it. We find that this is very key, and in fact, the few countries that I met with recently are facing this issue on manpower and competency. What does DDM stands for? Okay, it stands for Digital Delivery Management. Now, essentially, if you look at the pillars of digital transformation, it is a key portion to prop up the so-called workforce skill set, right? In other words, with this scheme in mind, will be able to benchmark the competency level of the BIM professionals. Currently, this is an issue that we have, especially there's a demand for BIM managers, and everybody will call themselves a BIM manager. However, after the employer engaged a person, then he realized that he may call himself a BIM manager, but his skill set and competency does not match that of a BIM manager. He can only do certain part of perhaps a bit of a coordination. So that is the problem that we face at one time. And that's why we feel that it is important and key to roll out this scheme in order to benchmark the skills and competency of the BIM professionals, right? So that it will address both the demand, all right, as more and more employers requires these people with the correct skill set, and we're able to provide the supply, to regulate the supply, that if they want to have more modelers, we can get the modelers. If we want to have a person who call himself a coordinator or a specialist, is able to perform that task. Okay, this skill framework for built environment is a national initiative. You can take a snapshot of the QR code, you can download. There are lots of information in there. It goes into the even the salary range of the various roles. Career map, which I'm going to touch on later, the skills and competency maps. In other words, if you call yourself a tier 3, what are the competency required, right? It is all earmarked in there. And training programs, so they also recognize certain courses, and whereby these people can go and learn and upskill themselves. All right, so next we will move on to the career path, right? Now, this is a career map, right? It spans right across the construction industry. Extreme left, you have the architects, then you have the engineers, both structural and MEP, and then you have the quantity surveying, and comes construction management for production. This is where at the factory, now in Singapore, we have what is known as the PBVC. That means we actually do precasting on the yard, and then we bring the completed components and we assemble them on site. So this is where this construction management production is about. Okay, and then we have the construction management. This one will be dealing with mainly the contractors, the main contractors, the subcontractors. And after that, we have the project management, project managers. And right at the end, we have the facilities management, the FM people. And of course, if just before that is the DDM, right? That's where the this career path or career track, that's where we're talking about. This is in fact the main topic that we're discussing. So right at the bottom, as you mentioned here, tier 4, we have the assistant specialists or modelers. That is the entry level as they come in, and then they work themselves up the career path, right, all the way to T4, T3 as a specialist, and then T2 as a lead, and then move on to chief digital officer as tier 1. Now, at the same time, this career mapping, all right, allows horizontal progression as well. So, in other words, if you're an architect working in a firm that is you're very good, all right, you're very good at digital. In fact, you'll be doing some models themselves. So you can actually come in and apply and get yourself accredited as a T3 or T2 if you have that. so-called that skills and competency, right? So in other words, this allows for horizontal movement, horizontal progression as well from other roles that you can come into digital, then you can move up the digital BDM track. All right, next we talk about how does this DDM will impact the major players in the industry. First of all, we talk about procurers. Who are the procurers? Procurers are probably the owners of the project, right? They can be a department, they can be a big company. They want to run the project. And as they look at the so-called project team, right, they will actually can assess in terms of what are the capabilities of the project team. For instance, they may be looking for architects, engineers, and by looking at the number of professionals that they have with the correct DDM accreditation, they are able to so-called determine that this company has got the capabilities because he's got the number of qualified persons. Okay, so in other words, they're able to differentiate the quality as they look at based on the company's strength. Now, for employers, we talk about employers will be probably bosses of firms, the three discipline architect, structural engineer, and MP engineers, as they look for the BIM professionals. Now, with the DDM accreditation, all they have to do is to ensure that they have that qualification, and then they have the confidence that they can get the right person with the right competency. As for the individuals, well, it's your career path, right? You have a better so-called, it's already tracked for you already. In other words, when you come in, you can know for how many years you can move yourself up the ladder. And of course, you have to do upscaling in terms of learning the required competency at that point of time. Okay, so in other words, even with this scheme, all right, training providers, we're talking about people who are running courses out there, they're able to actually support this in terms of the pre-employment training, as well as a continuing education training, right? Especially when you get the accreditation, you are supposed to learn on the way. So in other words, you have to chalk up points for you to, before you can renew to the same tier, or you can also upgrade yourself and apply for the next higher tier. Now, let's give an overview of the DDM scheme. Accreditation tiers. Essentially, there are 4 tiers. Start with tier 1, Chief Digital Officer. This will be probably the main person. It will be a superior handling the whole BIM team. Next, we have the lead, or what's known as the BIM manager. Again, he will manage the 2 tiers below him. Then tier 3 will be a specialist. Essentially, it's a BIM coordinator. And tier 4 is the entry-level BIM modeler, right? Or we call it assistant specialist. Now, the accreditation validity is for 2 years. Now, after that, then you can do 2 things. One, to renew it, to continue your particular tier, or you can upgrade yourself and apply to the next higher level. Now, in order to renew it, you have to actually chalk up what is known as points, right, or training hours to confirm that you are actually have received continued training. And in order to move yourself up the next ladder, you have to first of all fulfill the minimum requirement. One of which will be the number of years of working and the number of projects that you have. So even after the 2 years, you're still stuck with the minimum number of projects you cannot meet, especially for the lead. You need 5 projects. You only have 3 or 4 projects. You probably have to wait until the next year, then you apply until you have met the required requirement. Okay. Right. I explained a bit more in terms of the role, right? Okay, we start with the lowest entry level modeler. So essentially, they come in as an assistant specialist. These are essentially modelers. They will do the day-to-day modeling of the project model. Of course, you have to listen to the instruction from his superior, will probably be the tier 3, right, to tell him what to do and all that. Next will be in tier 3, the project coordinator, right? He will be again doing collaboration and information management, and again managing the modeler as well, right? So he has to, depending on the project phase, right? He has to fulfill the project delivery requirements, whether it's clash detection or whether there are changes to the so-called model, and then he has to follow up accordingly. Okay. Of course, you have to deal with his counterpart in the other firms. For instance, main contractors, the other engineers, also, you know, to make the model complete. Then BIM manager. Of course, the BIM manager will, in a way, he has to oversee the development and implementation of the roadmap and enabler. In other words, he has to have a higher competency level, right? Not only managing the project delivery tasks, but he also has to do a bit of a planning, working together with the chief digital officer in terms of how to manage, how to move the company forward and improve the competency and skill set level. Next, we have the chief digital officer. His main task is to have a strategic planning. At the same time, while he's overseeing the project delivery, right, the tasks involved, he also has to think about how to advance, how to improve the company, both in terms of competency and in terms of skill sets. Whether are there enough BIM professionals? If not, he's got to get more. And what are the skill sets available? Can he get better trained people? Or if not, then he will send these people to get a proper training. Okay, now we'll talk about the qualification and experience requirement, right? We start off with the tier 4 as a modeler. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you need to, first of all, have the working experience. As a modeler, you need to have at least 1 to 2 years of experience. You need to work in one project, and you need to be reviewed by one superior. In time of application, you have to submit a logbook, right? In fact, a logbook is a requirement for both the lower 3 tiers, tier 2, 3, and 4. We have to submit a logbook. In the logbook, you actually detail out what you have done or what you performed in that BIM model project, that to verify your tasks and able to match off the competency requirement. Okay. But for tier 4, you actually have to do a modeling test. So when your application is successful, you actually come in for a modeling test to confirm that you have the required competency. By the way, we actually have looked at all the universities and polytechnics who offered the BIM courses. We have actually accredited them, and graduates of these recognized institutions will be given a provisional T4 approval. In other words, all they have to do is to work for probably another 1 year or 2 years, right? And then they can actually apply with the logbook, and they don't have to do the modeling test anymore. Okay, so this is one requirement. The modeling test is for people who don't have the provisional T4, right? That means you come in fresh without anything, you have to go through a modeling test. Okay, for tier 3, again, the requirement a bit increased. Now, instead of 1 to 2 years, you must have at least 2 to 4 years, and you need to have 3 projects, and each project has to be reviewed or verified by one superior in charge of the project. And again, logbook and technical assessment. What is this technical assessment? Basically, you have to go through a test. It's a MCQ. The MCQ will actually test you on terms of the technical competencies, right? And then from there, if you pass the test and everything's in order, you get a tier 3 accreditation. Likewise, for Tier 2, the requirement, again, a bit more stringent this time, 4 to 6 years, and 5 BIM projects, again, by 3 reviews. Same thing, logbook and technical assessment as well. Next, you have the Tier 1. Now, Tier 1, you don't have a logbook, but you have to submit a review paper, right? And then you have to go through an interview, okay? In the interview, you'll be facing a panel of assessors, and then they will actually pose questions to you. At the same time, you also have to show that you can do a strategic planning for the company, how they can advance their technical competency in terms of the digital delivery. So with this, you need to have a minimum 9 to 10 years or 9 to 11 years of experience. Okay, this is basically a quick summary of the qualification and experience required. Right, next, in terms of modes of assessment of skills and competency, now, again, you find that we are looking at critical core skills as well as the technical skills and competency. So the core skills are very important. I will go through that later, right? You have to actually get 75% of relevant key tasks, 3 out of 6 critical core skills for the Tier 4. And then as you move outwards, the requirement become more and more stringent, okay? Like in a Tier 2, you need to have 4 out of 8 critical core skills. And in terms of the technical competency, you require 8 core and 10 elective. And for the Tier 1, right, you have to submit a review paper and you go through the panel interview, of which you have to demonstrate that you have 5 out of 8 critical core skill and up to 8 to 10 elective technical skills and competency. Now, exactly what these are, I'll cover them later on, but each of them, as I mentioned earlier, the validity of the accreditation will last for 2 years. After the end of 2 years, they can do 2 things, right, available for them. One is to continue, but you have to apply for renewal. And in order to do that, they have to show that they have gone a continue, so-called a CPD, right? Continual professional development. That means they have to show that they have attended recognized courses and spend number of hours doing some training. Okay, or they can upgrade to a higher tier if they qualify. In other words, let's say the person work for another 2 years, then he can manage to meet the so-called the requirement. He can actually apply to get a higher tier accreditation. Now, CPD, that's where we continue professional development. That's what we're talking about. We actually look at the training providers as well as IHL. Some of them offered courses for working people as well, whereby these people can attend to upskill themselves, to learn certain specific tasks, digital tasks as required. So we recognize them, and these courses that they attend can be used to fulfill the CPD requirement. Okay. Now, we talk about the required technical skill competency. This is an example of the Tier 4 and Tier 3. What are the so-called specific core tasks? For instance, we talk about in the Tier 4, you have got 6 core tasks. Tier 3, you have got how many? 8 core tasks, right? So they have to fulfill for Tier 4, I think 3, and Tier 3 you must have fulfill also 4 or something like that. So you have to fulfill this minimum, and you find that the electives or the technical competencies are also there, that they have to show in the logbook that they can attain, or they have show that demonstrate that they have such competency. So likewise, this is for Tier 1 and Tier 2. Right, coming to conclusion. Well, I guess we've taken quite a bit of journey exploring Singapore's strategic approach to preparing the built environment for the future. especially through the using the DDM certification for BIM professionals. This framework is not about just ticking boxes. It's in fact a powerful catalyst designed to drive real change and create future readiness. Right? Remember, the core objectives and outcome are highlighted as follows. You provide a structured, recognized validation and career progression. Give you a clear career pathway to individuals to build up their relevant digital skill sets. It also leads to enhanced employability and career mobility by addressing the demand for competent digital professionals. Ensuring crucial alignment and industry needs and transformation is very important. At the same time, it supports the sector's move towards whatever technicalities required, maybe it be IDD or VDC in the BIM environment. And also it offers essential support and sustainability for lifelong learning. So in other words, even the industry may be very at a low level of BIM maturity, but it allows, with these DDM schemes, allow the whole industry to level up, right? As the individuals or workforce start to learn new things and upskill themselves, right? As they discover more requirement by the digital data transformation and data management. And ultimately, it strengthened the industry. At the same time, even firms, right? It actually improved their reputation, right? And in other words, we want to drive and ensure that the workers or the skill or the task force in this sector are able to have skill set and competency that are world-class. So this is our so-called wish list. Of course, we are still in the progress. Like I said, this is an ongoing effort. Right? It's not that you start and then you have stop. Right? Once you promote this, it will carry on forever. Okay, so we now the vision for actually future built environment requires a collective effort, right? I voiced out the concepts of DDM, IDD, etc. And also the pillars of digital transformation. Now, if all this resonates some kind of and suggests avenues for mutual collaboration, knowledge sharing, or simply continuing this conversation, right, between Singapore and Brazil. Back in Singapore, we guys are absolutely delighted to connect and explore these possibilities further. Of course, the email address is there, right? You can always contact me. With this, I humbly finish my presentation here. Thank you.